Maya Chen's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the cabin floor as she stared through the frost-covered window. 7 massive wolves lay sprawled in the snow outside her door, their dark forms stark against the white wilderness. But it wasn't their size that made her heart hammer against her ribs, it was their eyes. Even through the blizzard, she could see them glowing with an intelligence that had nothing to do with reflection or tricks of light. One of them, a black wolf larger than the others, lifted its head and looked directly at her. Then it did something that made Maya's blood freeze in her veins. It pawed at her door. 3 deliberate scratches, like a knock. Maya pressed her back against the far wall of her one-room cabin, her photographer's mind cataloging impossible details even as panic flooded her system. The wolves weren't acting like wolves. They lay in formation, the largest black one clearly in charge, the others arranged around him like some kind of military unit. Their fur was matted with ice and snow, their flanks heaving with exhaustion, but none of them showed the wild desperation of starving animals. The black wolf scratched again. This time, the sound was weaker. Maya's hands shook as she reached for the hunting rifle mounted above her fireplace. She'd come to this remote corner of Alaska to escape the wreckage of her life in Seattle, her cheating ex-fiancé, her stalled career, the suffocating sympathy of well-meaning friends. The last thing she needed was to become a cautionary tale about city girls who died alone in the wilderness. But as she watched, one of the smaller wolves, gray with white markings, collapsed completely. Its breathing was so shallow she could barely see its chest rise and fall. "This is insane," Maya whispered to herself, but she was already moving toward the door. Every wilderness safety guide she'd ever read screamed against what she was about to do, but she couldn't watch them die. Not when they'd come to her for help. She cracked the door open, rifle in hand. "Easy," she called out, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I'm going to help you." The black wolf's golden eyes fixed on hers, and Maya felt a jolt of recognition she couldn't explain. For a moment that stretched too long, they simply stared at each other. Then the wolf slowly, deliberately, lowered its massive head in what looked impossibly like a nod. Maya opened the door wider, stepping back as the wolves limped into her cabin. They moved with careful precision, shaking snow from their coats but avoiding her furniture, her camera equipment, even the scattered pieces of her broken mug. The black wolf positioned himself near the door like a sentinel while the others arranged themselves around her fireplace. She should have been terrified. Instead, Maya found herself grabbing towels and blankets, checking the gray wolf's breathing, adding wood to the fire. The wolves accepted her help with a quiet dignity that made her chest ache. When she brought out her emergency medical supplies, they held still as she cleaned their wounds and applied antibiotic ointment to their frostbitten paw pads. "What are you?" she murmured as she worked, but none of them answered. Of course they didn't. They were wolves. Wild animals. The fact that she'd expected a response was just proof of how isolated she'd become. As the cabin warmed, the wolves' eyes began to droop. One by one, they settled into sleep, their breathing deepening and evening out. Only the black wolf remained alert, those unnerving golden eyes tracking Maya's every movement. "You can sleep too," she told him, settling into her own bed in the corner. "I'm not going anywhere." His gaze held hers for another long moment before he finally rested his great head on his paws. But even as his eyes closed, Maya sensed he wasn't truly asleep. He was guarding her. The thought should have been ridiculous, but as exhaustion pulled her under, Maya felt safer than she had in months. Her dreams were wild and vivid. She was running through moonlit forests, her feet barely touching the ground as she leaped over fallen logs and dodged between trees. The air was sharp and clean in her lungs, filled with scents she could somehow identify: pine, earth, the musk of deer, the metallic tang of snow. Behind her, she could hear voices calling her name, but they weren't quite human voices. They were deeper, richer, with an undertone that made her bones vibrate. "Maya. Maya, where are you?" She ran faster, branches catching at her hair and clothes, her heart pounding not with fear but with exhilaration. She belonged here, in this wild place between worlds, running with creatures that understood the language of instinct and moonlight. Maya. She jerked awake to find pale morning light filtering through her windows. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside buried in pristine snow. And her cabin was empty. Maya sat up, her heart sinking as she took in the space around her. No wolves lay sleeping by her fireplace. The towels she'd used to dry them were neatly folded on her table. Even the broken pieces of her mug had been swept away. For a moment, she wondered if she'd dreamed the entire thing. But then she saw them, 7 sets of men's clothing scattered around her cabin. Jeans and flannel shirts, boots and socks, all in different sizes. All still warm to the touch. Maya's hands trembled as she picked up a black wool sweater from near the door where the black wolf had lain. It smelled like pine forests and winter air, and something else. Something that made her pulse race with recognition. A piece of paper fluttered to the floor. Maya bent to retrieve it, her breath catching at the elegant handwriting scrawled across the page. Thank you for saving us. You're in terrible danger. Trust no one who comes looking for you. A. Maya stared at the note until the words blurred together, her logical mind warring with the impossible evidence before her eyes. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling her windows and sending snow swirling past the glass like a warning. In the distance, she could swear she heard the sound of howling. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The sound of rotor blades cutting through morning air shattered the pristine silence outside Maya's cabin. She dropped the men's clothing she'd been examining, again, and rushed to the window, her stomach plummeting at the sight of a black military helicopter descending toward the clearing beside her cabin. 3 men in tactical gear jumped out before the aircraft had fully settled, their movements precise and coordinated. Maya's photographer's eye automatically cataloged details: military-grade weapons, communication headsets, the kind of body armor she'd seen in war zones during her brief stint as a photojournalist. These weren't park rangers or local wildlife officials. The lead man was tall and lean, his silver hair cropped short beneath a black cap. Even from a distance, Maya could see the cold calculation in his pale eyes as he surveyed her property. He moved like a predator, and every instinct she possessed screamed at her to run. Instead, she grabbed her camera and snapped several quick shots through the window before tucking it away. Whatever was happening, she wanted evidence. A sharp knock rattled her door. Maya forced herself to breathe normally as she opened it, keeping her expression neutral despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Good morning, ma'am." The leader's voice was crisp, professional. "Colonel Vance, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're investigating reports of dangerous wolf activity in this area." Maya's grip tightened on the doorframe. "I wasn't aware Fish and Wildlife used military helicopters." Vance's smile was thin and cold. "Special circumstances require special measures. We have reason to believe a pack of extremely aggressive wolves may have threatened local residents. Have you seen any unusual wolf activity, Miss Chen?" The way he said her name made Maya's skin crawl. He already knew who she was, which meant this visit was anything but routine. She thought of the note hidden in her pocket, the elegant warning script that had kept her awake most of the night. "I've seen some wolves in the distance," she said carefully. "But nothing unusual. They seem to be avoiding human contact." In the distance. Vance stepped closer, his pale eyes never leaving her face. "You didn't have any direct contact with them? They didn't approach your cabin, perhaps seeking food or shelter?" Every fiber of Maya's being wanted to tell him about the 7 wolves who'd collapsed at her door, but the memory of those impossibly intelligent golden eyes held her back. "No. Like I said, they kept their distance." One of Vance's companions, a stocky man with a scar running down his left cheek, whispered something in the colonel's ear. Vance nodded, his expression hardening. "I'm afraid we'll need to search your cabin, Miss Chen. For your own safety, of course. These particular wolves are extremely dangerous. Do you have a warrant?" "We have authority to investigate threats to public safety." Vance's tone brooked no argument. I'm sure you want to cooperate with federal officers. Maya stepped aside, knowing she had little choice. The three men moved through her small cabin with practiced efficiency, their eyes missing nothing. They examined her fireplace, her medical supplies, even the neatly folded towels on her table. Maya's heart hammered as Scarface lingered near the spot where she'd found the black sweater, but he moved on without comment. You live here alone? Vance asked, running his fingers along her windowsill. Yes. Brave of you. Most people wouldn't choose such isolation. He paused at her camera equipment, examining the expensive lenses with interest. Wildlife photographer? Among other things. Must get lonely out here. Easy to imagine things in the wilderness. Shadows that look like animals, sounds that seem almost human. His pale eyes fixed on hers. The mind plays tricks when we're isolated. Maya forced herself to hold his gaze. I know the difference between imagination and reality, Colonel. I'm sure you do. Vance's smile was razor sharp. But sometimes reality is stranger than we think. The third man, who'd been examining her bathroom, returned with a small device in his hand. Vance nodded approvingly as the man placed it beneath Maya's kitchen table. A tracking device. They weren't even trying to hide it. We'll be monitoring this area closely, Vance said, moving toward the door. If you see anything unusual, anything at all, you contact us immediately. He handed her a card with nothing but a phone number. Day or night. These wolves are extremely dangerous, Miss Chen. They've already killed 3 people. Maya's blood went cold. Killed? Torn apart, Scarface added with obvious relish. Barely left enough pieces to identify. That's enough, Sergeant. Vance's voice was sharp, but his eyes never left Maya's face. The point is, these aren't ordinary wolves. They're cunning, organized, and utterly vicious. If you value your life, you'll stay inside after dark and keep your doors locked. After the helicopter disappeared into the distance, Maya slumped against her closed door, her hands shaking. Everything about the encounter felt wrong. The military gear, the planted tracking device, the way Vance had watched her like he was waiting for her to slip up. And those claims about people being killed, if that were true, why weren't there warnings on the news? Why was she hearing about it from shadowy federal agents instead of local authorities? She pulled out her phone to research Colonel Vance and his organization, but there was no signal. The device they'd planted was probably jamming her communications. Maya was pacing her cabin, trying to figure out her next move, when she heard it. A low whine from outside, barely audible but full of pain. She rushed to the window and her heart stopped. The black wolf lay crumpled in the snow 20 feet from her door, blood matting his dark fur. One of his hind legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and she could see burns along his side that looked like they'd come from some kind of electrical weapon. No, 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 Maya whispered, grabbing her medical supplies and rushing outside despite every rational thought screaming at her to stay inside. The wolf's golden eyes found hers as she approached, and she saw recognition there, along with pain so deep it made her chest ache. What did they do to you? She murmured, kneeling beside him in the snow. The wolf tried to lift his head but collapsed with a sound that was almost human in its anguish. Maya worked frantically, applying pressure to the worst wounds, checking his breathing and pulse. The burns looked like they'd come from a taser or cattle prod, and his leg was definitely broken. As she worked, the wolf's eyes never left her face, and she found herself talking to him like he could understand every word. You have to stay with me, okay? I know you're hurt, but you have to fight. Your pack needs you. She stroked his massive head, her fingers coming away bloody. I saw what those men were really looking for. They're hunting you, aren't they? All of you. The wolf made a sound deep in his throat that might have been agreement. Maya managed to get him inside, though it took all her strength to support his weight. She settled him by the fireplace, building up the flames to combat the shock that was setting in. As she worked on his wounds, cleaning and bandaging them with careful precision, she noticed something strange happening. The burns were healing. Not quickly, but visibly, the angry red welts fading to pink and then to normal skin beneath his fur. And his breathing was getting stronger, steadier, as if her touch somehow accelerated his natural healing process. That's not normal, Maya whispered, but she kept working. Nothing about the last 2 days had been normal. As the afternoon wore on, the wolf's condition improved dramatically. The smaller wounds closed completely, and even his broken leg seemed to be mending. Maya dozed fitfully in her chair beside him, exhaustion finally overwhelming her adrenaline. She woke to the sound of bones cracking. Maya's eyes snapped open to find the wolf writhing on her floor, his body contorting in ways that defied biology. His spine arched impossibly, his limbs stretching and reshaping with wet, horrible sounds. She scrambled backward, her rational mind trying to process what she was seeing even as every primitive instinct screamed at her to run. The transformation was agonizing to watch. The wolf's muzzle shortened, his fur receding to reveal human skin beneath. His powerful haunches reformed into long, muscled legs while his front paws became hands with elegant, strong fingers. Through it all, he never stopped watching her with those golden eyes, now set in a face that was devastatingly, impossibly human. When it was over, a man lay naked and breathing hard on her cabin floor, his dark hair damp with sweat and his skin marked with the same wounds she'd tended on the wolf. He was beautiful in a way that made her forget how to breathe, all sharp angles and lean muscle, with high cheekbones and a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. The same golden eyes that had pleaded with her for help, that had watched her with such intelligence and pain. Maya. Her name sounded different in his deep voice, roughened by the transformation. Thank you. She stared at him, her mind reeling. This isn't possible. I know how it looks. He tried to sit up, wincing as his healing ribs protested. I know how insane this must seem. Insane doesn't begin to cover it. Maya pressed her back against the wall, needing the solid support. You were. A wolf. Yes. He managed to pull himself into a sitting position, unconsciously graceful despite his injuries. My name is Alexei Volkov. I'm the alpha of the last free werewolf pack in North America. The words hit Maya like physical blows. Werewolf. The stuff of movies and horror novels, not her carefully ordered reality. But she'd seen the transformation with her own eyes, had felt the impossible intelligence in the wolf's gaze. The others, she managed. Your pack. Alexei's expression darkened, pain flashing across his features that had nothing to do with his physical wounds. Captured. Vance's organization has been hunting us for months. They finally cornered us yesterday during the storm. But you escaped. I stayed behind to give the others time to run. It didn't work. His hands clenched into fists. They have weapons, technology we can't fight. Tranquilizer darts loaded with silver nitrate, electrical nets, tracking devices that work even when we shift. Maya thought of the tracking device now hidden beneath her table, of Vance's cold eyes and calculated questions. What does he want with you? To create an army. Alexei's voice was bitter. Vance works for a black ops division that experiments on shifters. They're trying to synthesize our abilities, create super soldiers who can heal from any wound, who have enhanced strength and speed and senses. That's. Maya started to say impossible, but stopped herself. Nothing was impossible anymore. How many of you are there? We're there, Alexei corrected grimly. My pack was the last. 7 of us, hiding in the wilderness, trying to stay free. Now it's just me. The weight of his loss hit Maya like a physical blow. She thought of the 6 other wolves who had sought shelter in her cabin, their quiet dignity and obvious trust in their alpha. We have to get them back. Alexei's golden eyes sharpened on her face. We? Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. I meant, you have to. No, you were right the first time. Alexei struggled to his feet, and Maya tried not to notice the play of muscle beneath his scarred skin. You're involved now, whether you want to be or not. Vance suspects you helped us. He won't let that go. Then I'll disappear. Leave Alaska, go somewhere he can't find me. There is nowhere he can't find you. Alexei moved to the window, peering carefully through the curtains. His organization has resources you can't imagine. And now that you've seen me shift, now that you know what we are, you're a liability. Maya's mouth went dry. What are you saying? I'm saying Colonel Vance will kill you to protect his secret. The only question is whether he does it quickly or slowly. The casual way he delivered the death sentence made Maya's knees weak. She sank into her chair, trying to process the complete destruction of her life in the span of 2 days. But there might be another way, Alexei continued, his voice gentler. Your grandmother, she protected this territory for decades. The old-timers in my pack remembered her. Maya looked up, startled. My grandmother died when I was 12. She was just a sweet old lady who left me this cabin. Elena Chen was one of the most powerful witches in North America. Alexei turned from the window, his golden eyes intense. She warded this entire valley against supernatural detection. That's why my pack was able to hide here, why Vance's technology doesn't work properly in this area. Witch. Maya laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. Of course. Why not? Werewolves, evil government conspiracies, and now my dead grandmother was secretly a witch. The power often runs in families, Alexei said quietly. It might have skipped your mother's generation, but you. Maya, how did you know to save us? What made you trust 7 strange wolves enough to let them into your home? Maya opened her mouth to say it was simple compassion, basic human decency. But the words died in her throat as she remembered the moment their eyes had met through the window. The instant recognition, the bone-deep certainty that they needed her help. The way the wolf's wounds had healed faster under her touch. No, she whispered. The way you're healing me even now, Alexei continued. I should barely be able to stand after what Vance did to me. But being near you, having you tend my wounds. I can feel my strength returning. Maya looked down at her hands, seeing them as if for the first time. I'm not a witch. Then explain how you're doing this. Alexei stepped closer, and Maya caught his scent, pine forests and winter air, wild and clean. Explain how you knew to save us, how you made us feel safe enough to sleep in your presence. Explain the dreams. Maya's head snapped up. What dreams? Running through moonlit forests. Hearing voices that aren't quite human calling your name. Alexei's eyes were gentle now, understanding. We shared that dream, Maya. All of us. It's how we knew to come to you, how we knew you were the key to our survival. The room seemed to spin around her. Maya gripped the arms of her chair, trying to anchor herself as her entire understanding of reality crumbled and reformed. I can't be a witch, she said weakly. I'm a photographer. I take pictures of nature and sell them to magazines. I don't cast spells or brew potions or whatever it is witches do. Magic isn't always flashy spells and cauldrons, Alexei said. Sometimes it's as simple as being in the right place at the right time, knowing things you shouldn't know, healing with a touch. Your grandmother's power protected this valley for 70 years. When she died, that protection should have died with her. But it didn't. It's been growing stronger. Because of me. Because of you. Maya closed her eyes, trying to make sense of it all. When she opened them again, Alexei was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. If I am what you think I am, she said slowly, if I really have inherited some kind of power, then we can use it to rescue your pack. Something flickered in Alexei's eyes, hope, maybe, or hunger. It would be dangerous. Vance's facility is heavily guarded, designed to hold creatures with supernatural abilities. And if we're caught, then we make sure we're not caught. Maya stood, feeling steadier than she had since the helicopter landed. You said I'm involved now whether I want to be or not. Fine. Then let's make it count. Alexei studied her for a long moment, and Maya felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. When he finally nodded, it felt like a covenant being sealed. "There's something else you should know," he said. "About the bond between us." Maya's pulse quickened. "What bond?" "When a werewolf's life is saved by a potential mate, it creates a connection. You've been seeing through my eyes in your dreams, feeling my emotions. And I've been feeling yours." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "The attraction you're feeling isn't just physical, Maya. It's deeper than that. Older." Heat flooded Maya's cheeks. She'd been trying to ignore the way her body responded to him, the pull she felt every time he looked at her. "I don't understand." "Neither do I, completely. But I know that being near you feels like coming home after a lifetime of wandering." Alexei stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "And I know that if we're going to save my pack, we need to understand what's happening between us." Maya looked up into those impossible golden eyes and felt something shift inside her chest, like a lock clicking open. Whatever was happening to her, whatever she was becoming, she wasn't facing it alone. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling her windows with a sound like warning whispers. Maya thought of the tracking device hidden beneath her table, of Colonel Vance's cold smile and deadly promises. Tomorrow, they would come for her. But tonight, she had a werewolf alpha to heal and a power to understand. Tonight, everything changed. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. Maya woke before dawn with ice in her veins and voices in her head. "Help us. Please, help us." She bolted upright in her chair, her heart hammering as the phantom voices faded. Across the room, Alexei was instantly alert, his golden eyes finding hers in the darkness. "You heard them," he said. It wasn't a question. Maya pressed her palms against her temples, trying to silence the lingering echoes of pain and fear that weren't her own. "I can feel them." 6 different voices, all calling for help. "They're alive, but they're..." She swallowed hard. "They're suffering." Alexei was beside her in one fluid movement, his warm hands covering hers. The moment their skin touched, the voices became clearer, more distinct. She could sense personalities now, fierce loyalty from one, gentle humor from another, deep protective instincts from a third. "Marcus," Alexei breathed, his eyes closing as he shared the connection. "That's Marcus you're hearing. And Elena, she's the youngest of us. And Dmitri." His voice broke slightly. "They're all still fighting." "How is this possible?" Maya whispered. "How can I feel them when I don't even know them?" Alexei's hands tightened on hers. "Because you're bound to us. All of us. Your grandmother made sure of that." "What do you mean, bound?" "Sit down. This is going to be difficult to hear." Maya remained standing, dread pooling in her stomach. "Just tell me." Alexei ran a hand through his dark hair, and for the first time since his transformation, he looked every bit as lost as she felt. 43 years ago, my pack was being hunted by an early version of Vance's organization. We were young, inexperienced, and we were dying. Your grandmother found us bleeding in these very woods." Maya's legs gave out. She sank into her chair, staring at him. 43 years ago? How old are you?" "Time moves differently for us. I was barely past my first century when Elena Chen saved our lives." Alexei began pacing, his movements restless and predatory. "She offered us sanctuary, protection from those who would harm us. But the magic required for that level of warding, it demanded a price." "What kind of price?" "A blood pact. Elena bound her life force to our pack, creating a mystical connection that would protect us as long as she lived. In exchange, we became guardians of this land, protectors of the balance between the human and supernatural worlds." Maya felt the room spinning around her. A blood pact. With werewolves. The magic chose her, Maya, just like it's choosing you now. Elena wasn't just a witch, she was a guardian, one of the few humans capable of bridging the gap between worlds. Alexei stopped pacing and faced her. When she died, that protection should have ended. But it didn't. It transferred to you. I never agreed to any pact. Magic doesn't ask permission. It simply is. Alexei's voice was gentle but implacable. The moment you chose to save us, the moment you opened your door and your heart to 7 strange wolves, you accepted the bond. It's been growing stronger every day since. Maya stood abruptly, anger flaring through her shock. So I'm trapped? Bound to a pack of werewolves for the rest of my life because my grandmother made some mystical deal decades before I was born? Not trapped, Alexei said quietly. Chosen. Before Maya could respond, the voices in her head suddenly screamed in unison. She doubled over, clutching her skull as waves of agony crashed through the psychic connection. Images flashed behind her eyes, sterile white rooms, metal restraints, needles filled with silver-laced compounds that burned like acid. They're experimenting on them, she gasped. Right now. I can feel everything they're feeling. Alexei caught her as she swayed, his own face pale with shared pain. The connection is getting stronger. It means. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the pre-dawn darkness. They found us, Alexei snarled, his eyes flashing with inhuman light. The tracking device. Maya looked toward the kitchen table where Vance's surveillance equipment lay hidden, then at the windows already showing the dark silhouettes of approaching aircraft. How many? 3 helicopters. At least a dozen men. Alexei was already moving, grabbing clothes from the pile she'd folded yesterday. We need to run. Now. Maya stuffed her camera and phone into a backpack while Alexei pulled on jeans and boots with practiced efficiency. The helicopters were circling now, their searchlights carving bright swaths through the darkness. There's a trail behind the cabin, Maya said, shouldering her pack. It leads deeper into the wilderness. They'll track us. Not if I can help it. Maya didn't know where the words came from, but she felt power stirring beneath her skin like electricity. My grandmother protected this land for decades. Maybe I can too. They slipped out the back door just as the first helicopter touched down in front of the cabin. Maya could see armed figures rappelling from the other aircraft, moving with military precision toward her home. This way, she whispered, leading Alexei toward the treeline. Behind them, she heard the crash of her front door being kicked in, followed by shouted orders and the sound of her cabin being torn apart. The forest was thick and dark, the snow crunching softly beneath their feet. Maya moved on instinct, following paths she didn't remember learning, guided by something deeper than memory. Beside her, Alexei moved like the predator he was, silent and deadly. They'd been running for 20 minutes when the searchlights found them. There. A voice echoed through the trees, amplified by a bullhorn. 2 subjects, heading north-northwest. The helicopters thundered overhead, their lights turning the forest into a nightmare of stark shadows and blinding glare. Maya could hear dogs barking now, and the heavy footfalls of pursuit teams crashing through the underbrush behind them. They're hurting us, Alexei panted. Driving us towards something. Maya felt it too, a wrongness in the direction they were being forced to run, like stepping toward a cliff edge in the dark. But they had no choice. The pursuit teams were closing in from 3 sides, leaving only one route of escape. They burst from the treeline into a small clearing, and Maya's blood went cold. More armed men waited in a perfect circle, their weapons trained on her and Alexei. At their center stood Colonel Vance, his pale eyes glittering with triumph. Miss Chen, he said pleasantly. How good of you to finally join us. And you've brought our missing specimen with you. How thoughtful. Alexei moved protectively in front of Maya, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Let her go, Vance. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. Vance stepped closer, and Maya could see the cruel satisfaction on his face. Miss Chen is far more valuable than you are, Wolf. Do you know what she did to my men yesterday? What she's been doing without even realizing it. Maya felt Alexei's confusion through their bond. What is he talking about? The healing, the connection to your pack, the way she knew exactly where to find medical supplies she'd never purchased. Vance pulled out a tablet, showing them thermal imaging footage. She's been unconsciously channeling power for days. Power we can harvest and replicate. You're insane, Maya breathed. I'm visionary. Imagine super soldiers who can not only heal from any wound but heal others as well. Imagine operatives who can psychically connect with their entire unit, sharing information instantly across any distance. Vance's eyes glowed with fanatical fervor. You're going to help us unlock the secrets of supernatural abilities, Miss Chen. Whether you want to or not. Rage exploded through Maya like liquid fire. Not her own rage, the fury of 6 captured pack members whose pain she'd been feeling all night, whose terror she'd shared through the psychic link. Their anger merged with hers, amplified by grief and desperation and the primal need to protect what she'd claimed as hers. No, she said, and her voice echoed strangely in the clearing. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. No. The word erupted from Maya's throat with a sound like breaking glaciers. Power exploded outward from her body in a visible wave, and the temperature in the clearing plummeted 20 degrees in a single heartbeat. Ice erupted from the ground beneath the soldiers' feet, climbing their legs like living things. The trees around the clearing creaked and groaned as frost spread across their branches with supernatural speed. Snow began falling from the clear sky, at first just a few flakes, then a driving blizzard that seemed to center on Maya herself. Impossible, Vance breathed, backing away as ice crept toward his boots. Maya felt the storm building inside her, wild and uncontrolled and hungry for destruction. The rage of her grandmother's legacy, the fury of the pack bond, the raw terror of being hunted, it all poured out of her in waves of elemental power that turned the forest into an Arctic wasteland. The soldiers were screaming now, trying to flee as the ice storm intensified. Several collapsed, overcome by the sudden hypothermia. Others fired their weapons blindly into the blizzard, their shots going wild in the whiteout conditions. But the power was too much. Maya felt it tearing through her body like electricity, burning away everything that made her human. She was dissolving into the storm, becoming one with the wind and ice and fury. Maya. Alexei's voice cut through the chaos, not spoken but projected directly into her mind. You have to stop. You're killing yourself. She tried to respond, tried to pull the power back, but it was like trying to dam a river with her bare hands. The storm was part of her now, and she was part of it, and she could feel her life force bleeding away with every snowflake that fell. Then Alexei's arms were around her, his warmth cutting through the deadly cold. His life force merged with hers through their bond, anchoring her to her humanity, giving her something to hold on to as the magical storm raged around them. Come back to me, he whispered in her mind. Don't let the power take you. Your pack needs you. I need you. Maya fought her way back to consciousness, slowly wresting control from the elemental fury that had consumed her. The blizzard began to dissipate, the ice stopped spreading, and the temperature gradually returned to normal. When her vision cleared, the clearing was empty except for her and Alexei. Vance and his soldiers were gone, fled or dead beneath the unnatural ice that still covered half the forest floor. The helicopters had crashed, brought down by the sudden storm, their twisted wreckage smoking in the morning light. What did I do? Maya whispered, staring at the devastation around them. You saved us, Alexei said simply. And nearly killed yourself in the process. Maya tried to stand and collapsed, her legs unable to support her weight. She felt hollow, drained, like the storm had burned away everything inside her. I can't control it. The power, it's too much. You will learn. Alexei lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. Your grandmother learned. You will too. What if I don't? What if next time I kill innocent people? Alexei was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could feel his internal struggle through their bond. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with an emotion she couldn't identify. There's a way to contain the power. To give you the control you need. He looked up at the sky, where the sun was beginning to rise through clouds that still glittered with unnatural ice. But it requires a sacrifice you may not be willing to make. What kind of sacrifice? Tonight is the blood moon, Alexei said quietly. It happens only once every 10 years, and it's the one night when the pack bonds can be fully transferred to a new guardian. The ritual would give you complete control over your inherited power, would let you save my pack and protect this land as your grandmother did. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with her magical storm. But accepting the full bond means giving up your human life forever. You would become something else, something between human and supernatural. You could never return to your old world, could never be just Maya Chen the photographer again. His golden eyes met hers, full of pain and desperate hope. The ritual requires willing sacrifice, Maya. It has to be your choice. Maya stared at him, feeling the weight of an impossible decision settling on her shoulders. Around them, the forest was silent except for the drip of melting ice and the distant sound of her pack members' voices, still calling for help across their psychic connection. How long do I have to decide? Until moonrise. About 12 hours. 12 hours to choose between the life she'd known and a future she couldn't imagine. 12 hours to decide whether to embrace a destiny that had been chosen for her before she was born. Maya closed her eyes and felt the pack bonds pulsing in her chest like second heartbeats. 6 lives depending on her decision. One man who had become more important to her than breathing, watching her with eyes that tried to hide his desperate hope. Tell me about the ritual, she said. Tell me exactly what it means to become a guardian. Alexei's arms tightened around her, and she felt his relief and terror in equal measure through their connection. It means binding your life to the pack forever, he said. Your life force becomes intertwined with ours. You age as we age, heal as we heal, die only when the last of us dies. In exchange, you gain power over the elements, the ability to cross between worlds, and the strength to protect what matters most. And if I refuse? The power will continue to grow wild inside you until it destroys you. My pack dies in Vance's laboratories. And the balance between worlds that your grandmother spent 70 years maintaining crumbles into chaos. Maya opened her eyes and looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to fade in the growing dawn. Somewhere out there, a blood moon was waiting to rise. Somewhere else, 6 werewolves were suffering in silver-lined cages, holding on to hope that their alpha would find a way to save them. And here, in the devastated clearing where she'd nearly lost herself to elemental fury, Maya Chen the photographer faced the end of everything she'd thought she was and the beginning of something she'd never imagined she could become. 12 hours, she repeated. 12 hours, Alexei confirmed. Maya felt the pack bonds pulse stronger, responding to her proximity to a decision. Soon, she would have to choose. Soon, everything would change. But for now, she let herself rest in Alexei's arms and tried to imagine what it would feel like to give up being human forever. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The Blackwater Research Facility squatted in the valley like a metal tumor, its razor wire fences and guard towers cutting harsh lines against the afternoon sky. Maya crouched beside Alexei in the tree line, her hands shaking as she studied the complex through binoculars. 60 guards minimum, she whispered. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, and those things that look like silver-lined electric fencing, Alexei finished grimly. Designed specifically to contain supernatural creatures. His golden eyes never left the building. The main laboratory is in the center. That's where they'll be holding my pack. Maya lowered the binoculars, her stomach churning. Through her psychic connection to the captive wolves, she could feel their pain like a constant ache in her chest. But worse than the pain was the growing weakness, as if their life forces were being slowly drained away. There's something else, she said. Something they're not telling us through the bond. I can feel their fear, but it's not just about the experiments. They're terrified of something specific. Alexei's expression darkened. Vance has been busy in the 3 days since we escaped his trap. Intel suggests he's moved beyond simple capture to active experimentation. What kind of experimentation? The kind that changes a person permanently. Alexei stood, his movements fluid despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. Are you sure about this, Maya? Once we go in there, there's no turning back. The blood moon ritual is only 6 hours away. Maya felt the weight of unspoken words between them. If she died during this rescue attempt, she would never have the chance to become the Pack's guardian. His people would remain trapped forever, and the wild power inside her would die with her. But she also knew she couldn't live with herself if she chose safety over saving innocent lives. I'm sure, she said, standing beside him. How do we get inside? Alexei smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, the expression held genuine warmth. Your grandmother taught me a few tricks during our years of partnership. Watch and learn. He closed his eyes and placed his hands flat against the trunk of a massive pine tree. Maya felt power flow through him, not the wild, elemental force that had nearly consumed her during their escape, but something older and more controlled. The tree's branches began to sway despite the still air, and Maya realized he was speaking to it in a language that had nothing to do with words. Druids, she breathed, understanding flooding through her. Your grandmother was many things, Alexei said without opening his eyes. Witch, guardian, and keeper of the old ways. She taught me that magic isn't about power, it's about connection. The tree's message came back through the network of roots and mycelium that connected the entire forest. Maya felt it like whispers in her mind. Guard rotations, patrol schedules, the locations of pressure sensors buried in the ground. The forest had been watching Vance's facility since it was built, cataloging every weakness. There, Alexei opened his eyes and pointed to a seemingly impregnable section of the compound's eastern wall. Maintenance tunnel, 20 feet below ground. It bypasses the main security grid. They approached the facility with painstaking care, using the forest's intelligence to avoid patrols and electronic surveillance. Maya had never felt so connected to the natural world. Every bird call carried information, every shift in the wind brought news of approaching danger. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. The maintenance tunnel was exactly where the trees had promised, hidden behind a camouflaged grate. They descended into darkness that smelled of concrete and recycled air, following pipes and electrical conduits toward the heart of the complex. The laboratory should be directly above us, Alexei whispered as they reached a junction in the tunnel system. But Maya, you need to prepare yourself for what we're about to see. Vance's experiments, they change people. Maya nodded, though her throat felt dry. Through the pack bond, she could sense they were close to the others. Their pain was sharper now, mixed with a desperate hope that made her chest tight. They found an access panel that led to a service corridor on the laboratory level. Alexei went first, his enhanced senses checking for guards before signaling Maya to follow. The corridor was sterile white, lined with doors that bore medical charts and security codes. The first door they opened made Maya's knees buckle. A man hung suspended in a tank of greenish fluid, tubes and wires attached to every part of his body. But it wasn't just any man. Maya could see the Lupin features trying to break through his human face, as if he was trapped mid-transformation. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, but his mouth moved constantly in what might have been screams. Failed experiment, Alexei said, his voice hollow. They're trying to force the change in humans who don't carry the wolf gene. This is monstrous. It gets worse. They moved deeper into the laboratory, passing room after room of horrors. Humans injected with werewolf blood, their bodies rejecting the change in ways that defied description. Computer terminals displayed research data that made Maya sick, genetic profiles, injection schedules, autopsy reports. And then she saw the name that made her blood freeze, Elena Chen. Alexei, she whispered, pointing to a research file displayed on one of the monitors. They have my grandmother's blood. He moved to the computer, his face grim as he scrolled through the data. Vials of it, collected after her death. They've been using it in their experiments, trying to replicate the Guardian bond artificially. Maya read over his shoulder, her horror growing with each line. They think her blood is the key to controlling supernatural abilities. They're injecting it into the test subjects along with werewolf genetics. Creating abominations, Alexei snarled. Beings with power but no soul, no connection to the natural order. A sound from deeper in the laboratory made them both freeze, a howl of pain that vibrated with supernatural resonance. Maya felt it through the pack bond like a physical blow. Anya, Alexei breathed, and she felt his terror spike through their connection. That's my sister. They ran toward the sound, caution abandoned in the face of family in danger. The laboratory opened into a vast chamber lined with containment cells, each one holding a different nightmare of science gone wrong. But Maya's attention fixed on the cell in the center, where a young woman with Alexei's dark hair hung suspended in chains that glowed with silver inlay. Anya was beautiful even in her suffering, but Maya could see the damage Vance's experiments had wrought. Silver burns covered her exposed skin, and her eyes held a wildness that spoke of minds pushed beyond endurance. Worse, Maya could feel through the bond that the girl's life force was fading. Whatever they'd done to her, it was killing her slowly. The other cells, Maya said, forcing herself to look away from Anya's suffering. Are those your pack members? Alexei nodded, his jaw clenched with rage. All of them. Marcus, Elena, Dmitri, Sasha, and Boris. They're alive, but barely. Maya could see what he meant. Each of the captured wolves had been changed by their captivity, their natural forms twisted by chemical interference. They were still recognizably werewolves, but there was something wrong with them, something that made her magical senses recoil. How do we get them out? She asked. The silver chains are keyed to specific frequencies, came a new voice from behind them. But I'm afraid you won't be needing that information. Maya spun to find Colonel Vance standing in the laboratory entrance, flanked by armed guards. But it was the man beside him that made her blood turn to ice. He was tall and aristocratically handsome, with silver hair and eyes like Arctic ice. He moved with the same predatory grace as Alexei, but where Alexei's presence felt warm and protective, this man radiated cold hunger. When he looked at Maya, she felt something dark and ancient stir in her bloodline. Maya Chen, the stranger said, his voice cultured and infinitely dangerous. How wonderful to finally meet my great-granddaughter. What? Maya stepped back, instinctively moving closer to Alexei. Allow me to introduce myself. Dmitri Kashai, leader of the Shadow Pack. He smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp for human mouths. Your grandmother Elena was my first and greatest love, before she chose the light over the power I could offer her. Alexei snarled, his body beginning to shift toward his wolf form. You're supposed to be dead. Death is such a limiting concept, Dmitri replied smoothly. Elena thought she killed me 70 years ago, but shadow magic has its advantages. I've been waiting, gathering strength, learning patience. And all the while I've been watching my bloodline continue through her descendants. Maya felt the world spinning around her. You're lying. Am I? Haven't you wondered why your power manifests as ice and shadow rather than the traditional earth magic of most guardians? Why you can sense the darkness in others' hearts? Dmitri stepped closer, and Maya could smell winter and old blood on him. You carry my gift as well as Elena's, child. The capacity for both creation and destruction. Maya, don't listen to him, Alexei warned, but she could feel his uncertainty through their bond. The experiments you've witnessed here, Dmitri continued, gesturing to the failed test subjects around them, were never Vance's idea. I've been guiding his research from the beginning, using him to weaken your precious Alpha's pack while I searched for you. Vance stepped forward, his face flushed with excitement. The Shadow Pack promised us unlimited test subjects in exchange for locating the Chen bloodline. When we found you, everything accelerated. You used me as bait, Maya realized. I used your compassionate nature exactly as Elena would have, Dmitri confirmed. You couldn't resist saving Alexei and his pack, just as she couldn't resist protecting the innocent. But where Elena chose to bind herself to the light, you have a choice she never had. He raised his hand, and Maya felt power call to something deep in her bloodline, something dark and hungry and utterly seductive. Join me, great-granddaughter. Accept your shadow heritage and I'll free Alexei's pack. Refuse, and watch them die in agony while Vance continues his experiments. Maya looked at Anya, whose breathing was growing shallower by the moment, then at the other captured wolves suffering in their silver cages. Through the pack bond, she could feel their hope and terror in equal measure. There's a third option, she said quietly. Maya, no, Alexei warned, sensing her intention through their connection. But Maya was already moving, her hands weaving patterns she'd never learned but somehow knew. The power building inside her wasn't the wild elemental force she'd unleashed before, it was something deeper, more controlled, drawn from the dark corners of her inherited magic. I can save them myself. She reached out with her consciousness, touching each of the pack members through their bond. Where her power met their pain, healing began. The silver burns on their skin faded, the chemical distortions in their systems neutralized, the damage to their minds slowly mending. But the effort was enormous. Maya felt her life force pouring out of her, drawn into the healing magic faster than she could replenish it. Around her, alarms began blaring as the facility's sensors detected the massive magical discharge. Impossible, Vance breathed, watching his test subjects heal before his eyes. Not impossible, Dimitri said, his voice full of dark satisfaction. She's using shadow magic, drawing power from the spaces between life and death. But she's untrained, unfocused. She'll burn herself out before she can save them all. Maya felt the truth of his words. The healing was working, but it was killing her. Her vision blurred as her strength ebbed, and she could feel her heartbeat becoming irregular. Through the pack bond, she felt Alexei's desperate love and fear. Stop, Maya. You're dying. I can't stop, she replied through their connection. Anya won't survive another minute without help. Indeed, Alexei's sister was the most damaged of all the captives. Whatever Vance had done to her specifically had pushed her beyond the normal limits of werewolf healing. She needed more power than Maya possessed, more than any single guardian could channel safely. Then take mine, Alexei said, and Maya felt him pouring his own life force through their bond into her failing magic. The combined power was enough to complete Anya's healing, but Maya could feel it burning through both of them like acid. They were linked now in a way that went beyond the pack bond, their life forces intertwined, their deaths approaching in perfect synchronization. But just as Maya felt herself beginning to fade completely, something else touched their shared magic. Something vast and ancient and utterly malevolent. The temperature in the laboratory plummeted as shadows began pouring from the walls like living things. Maya felt Dimitri's power wrapping around her own magic, not stopping the healing but corrupting it, turning her gift into something twisted and hungry. There, he purred, his voice seeming to come from the darkness itself. Now you understand what you truly are. Light and shadow, creation and destruction, bound together in perfect balance. Accept that nature, and you could rule both worlds. Maya felt the seductive pull of his offer. The shadow magic made everything easier, the healing flowed faster, her strength seemed limitless, and the suffering around her could be ended with a thought. She could free the pack, destroy Vance's facility, and claim the power that was her birthright. All she had to do was let the darkness in. Through the bond, she felt Alexei's horror as he sensed her temptation. Maya, please. That's not who you are. But looking around at the suffering in the laboratory, at Anya's tortured form and the other abominations Vance had created, Maya wondered if maybe darkness was exactly what the situation required. Maybe it's who I need to become, she replied, and felt Alexei's heart break through their connection. Dimitri's laughter echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Yes, great-granddaughter. Let the shadow in. Let it show you what true power means. Maya stood at the crossroads between light and darkness, between the woman she'd been and the creature she could become. Around her, alarms wailed and shadows danced, while the man she loved waited to see which choice would define not just her destiny, but the fate of both their worlds. The blood moon was rising, and with it, the moment when everything would change forever. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The blood moon hung like a crimson eye in the laboratory's skylights as Maya stood frozen between salvation and damnation. Dimitri's shadow magic wrapped around her like silk chains, promising power beyond imagination, while Alexei's love pulsed through their bond like a lifeline to her humanity. Choose quickly, great-granddaughter, Dimitri purred, his arctic eyes reflecting the moon's bloody light. The lunar window won't remain open forever, and your alpha's pack grows weaker with each passing moment. Maya could feel it, through the healing connection she'd forged. She sensed Anya's life force flickering like a candle in a hurricane. The other pack members were stabilizing, but they wouldn't survive much longer without a guardian's protection. And somewhere in the facility's depths, she could hear more victims of Vance's experiments crying out in pain. The shadow magic whispered seductively in her mind, "Take the power. End their suffering with a thought. Rule as you were meant to rule." Maya. Alexei's voice cut through the darkness, rough with emotion. "Whatever you choose, know that I believe in you. I've felt your heart through our bond. You could never become what he is." Dimitri laughed, the sound like breaking ice. "How touchingly naive. She carries my blood, Wolf. The same hunger for power that drove me to make the Shadow Pact flows in her veins." "No," Maya said quietly, and felt something shift inside her chest. "You're wrong about what drives me." She looked around the laboratory at the evidence of human cruelty, the failed experiments, the tortured wolves, the perversion of her grandmother's protective magic into something monstrous. Then she met Alexei's golden eyes and saw the absolute faith there, the unwavering love that had sustained her through every impossible moment since 7 wolves had collapsed at her door. "The shadow magic feels powerful because it feeds on fear and pain," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "But you know what's more powerful than that? Love. Connection. The willingness to sacrifice for others without expecting anything in return." Dimitri's expression darkened. "Sentiment will not save your precious pack." "You're right," Maya said, and began moving her hands in patterns that felt both familiar and utterly foreign. "Love won't save them. But love combined with power, both light and shadow, might." She reached out through the pack bond, but instead of just touching Alexei's energy, she opened herself completely to the connection. Not just to him, but to all of them: Anya, Marcus, Elena, Dimitri, Sasha, Boris. And beyond that, to every suffering soul in the facility, every victim of Vance's twisted science. The blood moon's light seemed to focus through the skylights, bathing Maya in crimson radiance as power unlike anything she'd ever felt began building inside her. But this wasn't the wild, destructive force that had nearly consumed her in the forest. This was controlled, purposeful, fed by love rather than rage. "Impossible," Vance breathed, backing against the laboratory wall as magical energy began crackling through the air. "The readings are off the charts. She's channeling more power than the facility can measure. She's transforming the ritual," Dimitri snarled, his composure finally cracking. "The little fool is trying to rewrite centuries of magical law." Maya felt the truth of his words. The traditional guardian bond required the witch to sacrifice their humanity to protect their charges. But Maya was creating something new, a connection based on mutual sacrifice, shared power, love given and received in equal measure. Through their bond, she felt Alexei realize what she was attempting. A mystical marriage, he thought in wonder. Not just guardian and pack, but true partnership. "Will you accept it?" Maya asked, even as power continued building around them. "It means binding your life to mine completely. If I fall to darkness, you fall with me." Alexei's response came without hesitation. "I was already bound to you the moment you opened your door to 7 strange wolves. This just makes it official." Maya felt his life force merge with hers, not as donor to recipient but as equal partners in something unprecedented. The blood moon's light intensified, and she realized she was no longer drawing power from just her own magical heritage, she was channeling the combined strength of everyone connected to her. "Stop this!" Dimitri roared, shadow magic lashing out like whips. "You don't understand what you're doing. The Shadow Pact exists because someone tried to combine light and darkness before. It drove them mad, turned them into monsters. Because they tried to take the power by force," Maya said, dodging his attacks while continuing to weave the binding spell. "They conquered the darkness instead of accepting it as part of themselves." She could feel the shadow magic in her bloodline, the heritage Dimitri had passed down through generations. But instead of fighting it or surrendering to it, she embraced it as part of who she was. The darkness wasn't evil, it was simply power without direction, strength without purpose. Combined with love, with the protective instincts that had driven her to save Alexei's pack, it became something entirely different. Light and shadow began spinning around Maya like a visible aura, not in conflict but in perfect balance. Through the mystical marriage bond, she felt Alexei's strength supporting her, anchoring her to her humanity even as power beyond mortal comprehension flowed through her body. "The healing," she whispered, extending the spell to encompass every damaged soul in the facility. "Not just the pack. Everyone." The magic spread like ripples in a pond, washing over Vance's failed experiments. Where it touched, the forced transformations began reversing, the chemical damage undoing itself, the madness lifting from minds pushed beyond endurance. Maya felt each healing like a small miracle, and the joy of it fed back into her power, making it stronger. But Dimitri wasn't finished. With a snarl of rage, he began shifting, not into wolf form, but into something far worse. His aristocratic features melted and reformed, becoming something that belonged in nightmares. Shadow poured from his skin like smoke, and his eyes became wells of absolute darkness. "If I cannot have your allegiance," he hissed in a voice like grinding stone, "then I will have your death. And through your death, I will finally destroy the light magic that has tormented me for 7 decades. He struck with inhuman speed, claws wreathed in shadow magic reaching for Maya's heart. But Alexei was faster, throwing himself between them, taking the blow meant for her. Maya felt his agony through their bond as Dimitri's claws tore through his chest, shadow magic poisoning the wounds. Alexei collapsed, his blood spreading across the laboratory floor in a pool that reflected the blood moon's light. "No!" Maya's scream shattered every piece of glass in the facility. Power exploded from her in waves that made her earlier ice storm look like a gentle breeze. But this time, it was controlled, directed entirely at the creature that had hurt her mate. Dimitri stumbled backward, his shadow form wavering under the assault. "You see," he gasped. "You see how easily love becomes rage? How quickly light turns to darkness? Join me willingly, or watch your precious alpha die while you become exactly what I am." Maya knelt beside Alexei, her hands hovering over his wounds. The shadow magic was spreading through his system like poison, and she could feel his life force ebbing through their bond. She had the power to save him, all she had to do was embrace the darkness completely, let it consume her compassion and turn her into something as monstrous as Dimitri. The temptation was overwhelming. With shadow magic, she could end Alexei's pain, destroy everyone who had ever threatened her pack, rule the supernatural world through fear. It would be so easy. "Maya." Alexei's mental voice was weak but steady. "Don't let me be the reason you lose yourself. I would rather die as your partner than live to see you become a monster." His words cut through the rage and darkness, reminding her of what she'd learned in that moment of perfect clarity. Love wasn't about eliminating obstacles or controlling outcomes. It was about accepting what you couldn't change and finding strength to endure it together. "You're wrong," Maya said to Dimitri, her voice calm despite the tears streaming down her face. "Love doesn't become rage. Love becomes sacrifice." She placed her hands on Alexei's wounds and began pouring her life force into him, not trying to fight the shadow magic but accepting it as part of the healing process. Light and darkness flowed together through their mystical marriage bond, and she felt something unprecedented happening. The shadow magic in Dimitri's attack wasn't being expelled, it was being transformed, purified by the love that connected Maya to everyone she'd sworn to protect. And through that transformation, she realized the truth about the Shadow Pack's curse. "You've been trapped," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "For 7 decades, you've been trapped in a form that feeds on darkness because you never learned to balance it with light." Dimitri's monstrous features wavered, and for a moment, Maya saw the man he'd been before the Shadow Pact. Handsome, proud, but desperately lonely. "The curse can be broken," she continued, rising to her feet as Alexei's wounds began healing with impossible speed. "Not through death or conquest, but through acceptance. Through forgiveness." "I don't want forgiveness," Dimitri snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Yes, you do. You've wanted it for 70 years. Maya stepped toward him, light and shadow still dancing around her form. "My grandmother couldn't give it to you because she was afraid of what you'd become. But I'm not afraid. I understand what it means to carry darkness alongside light." She extended her hand, and for a moment, the laboratory fell completely silent except for the sound of their breathing and the hum of magical energy. "Let me help you find your way back," Maya said. "Let me show you what my grandmother couldn't. That darkness doesn't have to define you." Dimitri stared at her outstretched hand, his monstrous form trembling with conflicting emotions. "You would forgive me? After everything I've done?" "I would try to heal you," Maya corrected. "Just like I healed everyone else here. Because that's what love does, it sees the potential for redemption even in the darkest places." For a long moment, the fate of 2 worlds hung in the balance. Then, slowly, Dimitri reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, Maya felt the full weight of his 7 decades of anguish, rage, and desperate loneliness. But she also felt the man he'd been before the darkness claimed him, someone who had loved her grandmother with genuine devotion, who had made terrible choices out of fear of losing that love. Light and shadow magic flowed between them, not in conflict but in perfect synthesis. Maya felt the curse breaking, not through violence but through acceptance, through the healing power of unconditional love. Dimitri's monstrous form began dissolving, revealing the aristocratic features beneath. But these weren't the cold, cruel lines Maya had seen earlier, they were the face of a man finally freed from a burden he'd carried for far too long. "Elena," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I can feel her presence in you. Her forgiveness. And her love," Maya said softly. "She never stopped loving the man you were before the darkness. She just couldn't save you from the choices you made." Dimitri nodded, his form beginning to fade as the curse released its hold on him. "Thank you," he said. "For showing me that redemption was always possible. I just had to be willing to accept it." He looked past Maya to where Alexei was sitting up, his wounds completely healed. "Protect her, Wolf. She carries more power than she knows, and there are others who will try to corrupt it as I did." "Others?" Maya asked, but Dimitri was already dissolving into motes of light and shadow that spiraled upward through the skylights. The Shadow Pack was not the only supernatural faction to be corrupted by power, his voice echoed as he faded. "But you have shown the way back to balance. Use it well." And then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of winter air and old magic. Maya sank to her knees, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The blood moon was setting, its crimson light fading to silver, and she could feel the mystical marriage bond settling into something permanent and unbreakable. She was no longer entirely human, but she wasn't something other than human either. She was simply Maya, witch, guardian, and partner to the most extraordinary man she'd ever met. Alexei gathered her into his arms, and she felt his relief and joy through their connection. Around them, the other pack members were awakening, their chains dissolving as Maya's power finally completed their healing. Even Vance's failed experiments were stirring, their sanity and humanity restored. "What happens now?" Anya asked, her voice hoarse but strong as she sat up in her cell. "The facility, the colonel, the others like us who are still trapped." Maya looked around the laboratory, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. But this time, it didn't feel crushing. It felt like purpose. "Now we build something new," she said. "A sanctuary for all shifters, a place where they can be safe and free. And we find the others, all the supernatural beings who've been captured, experimented on, or lost. She stood, helping Alexei to his feet, and felt the strength of their mystical marriage bond flowing between them. Through that connection, she could sense the potential for something unprecedented, not just a pack, but a new kind of family built on choice rather than blood, on love rather than survival. Colonel Vance was unconscious but alive, his mind wiped clean of all knowledge of the supernatural world. Maya felt a brief temptation to let him remember, to make him face the consequences of his actions. But that was the shadow magic talking, and she'd learned the difference between justice and revenge. The forest will take care of him, she said, sensing the ancient consciousness of the woods stirring in response to her power. He'll wake up believing this was all a gas leak hallucination. And if he ever tries to hurt innocents again. She didn't finish the sentence, but Alexei squeezed her hand in understanding. Some threats required permanent solutions, but those decisions would be made together, as partners. Over the following hours, as dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Maya and Alexei worked together to free every supernatural being in the facility. Some were shifters like themselves, others were beings Maya had only read about in her grandmother's journals. Fae, vampires, even a few humans with magical gifts. Each one was offered the same choice: join their growing family or go free with the promise of sanctuary if they ever needed it. Most chose to stay, drawn by the unprecedented sense of belonging that Maya's power created. As the last of Vance's equipment was destroyed and the facility prepared for demolition, Maya found herself standing in the clearing where this had all begun, watching the sun rise over her grandmother's protected valley. "Do you regret it?" Alexei asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Giving up your normal life for all this?" Maya leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through their bond. "I was never meant for a normal life," she said. "I was meant for this. For you. For all of them." She gestured to where their new pack, nearly 20 strong now, was setting up temporary shelters in the forest. Children who had been experimented on played alongside ancient beings who had forgotten what it meant to trust. Humans with magical gifts worked beside werewolves and fae to build something that had never existed before. 6 months, Maya murmured, thinking of how far they'd come since that snowy night when 7 wolves had collapsed at her door. 6 months, and we've already saved so many. "It's just the beginning," Alexei said, his voice full of quiet satisfaction. "I can feel them out there, others like us, still trapped, still suffering. But they won't be alone much longer." Maya smiled, raising her camera to capture the scene of their unusual family beginning their day. Through the lens, she could see the bonds of love and loyalty that connected them all, visible as golden threads in the morning light. But as she lowered the camera, something else caught her attention. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, she could see a pair of golden eyes watching them. As she looked closer, she realized it was a wolf, but not just any wolf. This one's eyes held the same impossible intelligence she'd first seen in Alexei. The wolf met her gaze for a moment, then disappeared into the forest. But not before Maya caught sight of something that made her heart race with excitement and purpose. There had been others with it. A whole pack of them, moving like shadows through the wilderness. "Alexei," she said softly, not taking her eyes off the tree line. "I think our work here is about to expand." He followed her gaze and saw what she'd seen, evidence of more supernatural beings in need of rescue, more family members waiting to be found. "Yellowstone?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Yellowstone," Maya confirmed, feeling the familiar thrill of a new mission calling to her. "There are still others out there who need us." As the morning sun climbed higher, painting the forest in shades of gold and green, Maya Chen, witch, guardian, and protector of the lost, began planning their next journey. Because she'd learned that love wasn't just about saving the people you'd already found. Sometimes it was about venturing into the unknown to find the ones who were still waiting to be saved. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of Yellowstone, glowing eyes watched and waited, hoping that salvation might finally be coming their way. The pack was growing. The family was expanding. And Maya's greatest adventures were still to come. Thank you for watching this video. subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.